Maurice Nicol, Psychological Commentary, Volume 2, based on his work with Gurdjieff. Birdlip, January 21st, 1945. Further note on eyes. Answers to questions arising from the previous paper. This is part 2 of 2. Every man and every woman is an experiment based on this idea, which must be constantly reflected on, constantly held in mind. Question 8, part B. Is real I the individual limit of potential development which lies above every man, the shape he could become, different for everyone or the same? Yes, it is the ultimate reality that we can attain. Behind real I lies God. But surely this question is a little formatory. Certainly everyone is an individual creation, and so real I can never be the same. The trouble is that we try to imitate other people, and it is just like a daffodil trying to become a tulip. There is not a single snowflake that is not quite different from another snowflake in its form of crystallization, although the general hexagonal pattern of the snow crystal is the same. Question 9. Is there any difference between eyes and inner consciousness? I can see no connection between these two factors in this question. Eyes are eyes, and inner consciousness is inner consciousness. If you mean by inner consciousness the power of self-observation, through this you can see eyes in yourself, but the question is like saying that if you have an electric torch in the dark and see a wall in front, is the wall the same as the torch? The work says by true self-observation, we let a ray of light into ourselves. Through this ray of light, we may see a thing in us, but an eye is not the same as a ray of light. And of course, a ray of light does not mean physical light, but the light of consciousness, which is the object of the work to increase beyond everything that you can imagine at present, so that you can see yourself at a glance and everything going on in every center. I will now comment on one or two observations that were made in the subgroups on points in this paper. Number one, there was something said in the paper that I thought was very encouraging. If you see a thing, even if you can't do anything with it, it will recede. This is quite right. And seeing this, you can catch a glimpse of what the work is about. You catch a glimpse of what self-observation is and why it is taught so strictly. The work says that self-observation is a method of change of being. This is a very important thing to understand, and it may take years before one catches a glimpse of its meaning. On all this depends inner separation. I ask you this question: how can you separate from anything in yourself unless you observe it? If you cannot see yourself at all and never observe what is acting through you at different times, if in short, you take yourself as one, you cannot change. If you can only see what you did not do and never observe what you did, you are certainly very externally minded and have not awakened the power of observing I, or the inner sense that we are all given. We are given this inner sense so that we can fulfill our meaning as self-developing organisms. All inner development would be quite impossible if we had not this sense that is turned inwards towards our psychic life, but merely possessed 5 senses turned outwards. Number 2, eyes are living, but may be induced to die. Eyes are certainly living and are quite real entities. Whether they die or not is another question. The work merely teaches that if they are not nourished, they get weak, but if, like the shades of Hades, they drink your blood, they become alive and begin to speak. Eyes may be absent from you for a time and revisit you, but that is another question. But it applies especially to higher work eyes in oneself. Our ordinary eyes are constantly with us. You know they are called the poor. Number 3, it would be interesting if we could discover what there is in one. One could have a most varied life and one varied eyes, or one varied life with most varied eyes, some quite valuable. Yes, this would mean having reached the level of balanced man who can move freely about in himself and in whom all different sides of himself are to some extent developed. That is, he is no longer his center of gravity in one center as have number 1 and number 2 and number 3 men. For example, if I am very much identified with my life as a doctor, I shall be able to move freely in myself and will have only a very one-sided development. When you're identified with your professional side or your birth side or whatever it may be, you cannot become a balanced man. I often think of myself that one of the best phrases one can use in regard to understanding what balanced man means is to be able to see what it means not to be identified with your life. Your past life should not catch you always and hold you down. Here, you all have something practical to work on for a long time. I will now comment on 2 further questions which have been sent in since the above was written. Number 10, is an I which passes straight into the emotional center one which is so well known to the intellectual center from habit that it no longer needs to pass to the intellectual center first? Well, this question is very formatory. I would simply say, do you really know about an I so distinctly? But you must remember that some impressions fall in the emotional center, and this means that it is necessary to observe how the emotional center reacts in face of life without self-observation. We have to employ the intellectual center to observe ourselves and not let an impression fall directly on the emotional center without the moment of consciousness in which one sees where it is falling. Observing eyes start in the intellectual center where our consciousness, broadly speaking, lies. It is a question of what you let through. You can take hold of a red-hot poker by accident and yet observe the reaction before it happens automatically. It is a question of instinctive center and the slight possible control of it, and the same applies to the emotional center. Question 11, how does an I affect the emotional center direct? Can an impression pass directly to the emotional center without passing through the intellectual center or the network of associations? It is a negative emotion invariably preceded by a thought. Is a negative emotion preceded by a thought? I would say that it is a question of attitude. If you have not seen how you would react from attitude, which is mental to begin with, and accompanied by practically no thought, and yet is then the impression, will fall directly on the negative part of the emotional center. Remember that the work teaches our impressions come through the intellectual center and then pass to the other centers. It is necessary to make a conscious point at the place where they come in. If you allow an impression to go right through when it will follow its own habitual path. We will begin to check the effect of external impressions in the mental center first of all. For instance, need I, if I feel cold, shiver and complain? If I am more in control of myself, I need not react in that way unless I wish to. If I am not quite mechanical in the point of incoming impressions that fall upon the mind will be capable of a kind of selection so that they do not ring up automatically the same reactions. The point of the work is to make a conscious point in the place of incoming impressions, and this demands the power of observation so that one is separated from the continual effect of life coming in and reacting always in the same mechanical way. It is a marvelous thing to realize that one need not take a life event always in the same way. But for this to begin to take place, one has to be able to see the event and at the same time see one's mechanical reaction to it. When the work intervenes between these two things, the external event coming in through the senses and the mechanical reaction that would ordinarily take place when there is this moment of conscious choice, which the work seeks to establish in us. Then we begin to understand what the work is about practically. This is called moving hydrogen 12 to the point of incoming impressions, and this means also beginning to live consciously in the midst of life.